Chapter 11, Annotating Your Drawing. Hi, Joe Cerrone. We're going to look at Chapter 11 from CAD 134, Basic AutoCAD for Interior Design. Our learning objectives are to create a style using the text, and so it's creating a text style, and to create a dimension style as well as a multi-leader style. If we look at the textbook, what we're going to do here is we're going to go through and we're going to create these different text styles. And so essentially we're going to create like a style with a font and a text height. So as we start to take a look at how this is laid out, it depends on whether you're using paper space or model space when you use text. Paper space is essentially what layout mode is, and that's going to be geared towards the exact size of the paper. Whereas model space, when we're putting text on, needs to be kind of calculated so that it's the right height on the printed paper. And as we go through this chapter, we'll explore how that works. And so to begin a new text style, what we're going to do is go to the Annotation tab, and we're going to go and choose Create a text style. And so once we're in the text style, we're going to go through and we're going to create a new text style. It's going to come back with this style 1, and we're going to name it Notes. Then we're going to go and set up the text style once we have named it. And to do that, what we'll do is to set the font as City Blueprint, which looks like handwriting. And then we'll check off this Annotative tab. And what they say here is to set the paper text height to 1/8 of an inch. If we leave it to 0, it will prompt us for the text height, which I think is actually pretty good, but we'll follow the directions and see how this works out. All right, so getting back, here we are in the text command. We're going to create a new text style. And what I decided to do was to use my Chapter 10 drawing, because I think essentially we're going to be using that drawing to add these dimensions to anyway, so we might as well create a text style for it. So here we are at the Annotate tab, and here's our text area, and then here's our text style. And so we click here, and so it looks like we've got some styles that are already in here because I'm using one of the Oakton title blocks, but that's fine. The default is set for standard, and what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to change that, and we're going to say new, and then we're going to name that new style Notes. We're going to say OK. And now we're working within the Notes text style. The next thing that we're going to do is basically we're just going to match up what they have here. And so we're going to set this as City Blueprint, regular, annotative. And even though they say to set the paper height to 1/8 of an inch, it doesn't seem like they did it. It looks to me like that's a 0. But we'll set it for 1/8 of an inch and see how that works. So I'm going to set the font here to City Blueprint. And as you can see, it looks like text. That would be hand drawn. The height we're going to set up at 1/8. Width factor we'll leave at 1. And obliquing angle. Basically what width factor will do is it will make it wider. And so if I set it at like 3, you can see, or if I set it at 2, let's go back to 1. An obliquing angle will basically make it look like it's italicized. And so if I say 10, 20, 30, but we'll leave it at 0. You can also, with some of the fonts, do these different effects where you can make it upside down and backwards, drive your coworkers crazy. We'll go and we'll say annotative, and we'll put it back the way it's supposed to be. So here we are, we created the notes text style, city blueprint. The font style is regular. I'm not sure what that comes down to. We'll come back to that later. It's set for annotative. They told us to set it at 1/8 of an inch, and so we're good. And then they show how to do this on the Mac. And so now that we have this set, we're going to go through and create another text style. And so as we go through, for future use, let's create a second text style, and we're going to call the text style title block. And so there it is, title block. We're going to use Times New Roman. You can see here's our notes, and it's got this little annotative text symbol that tells us that it's annotative. And so we're going to follow the directions for that now. So we can just say apply and close, and then let's just do it again. We come back here to the text style, and then it looks to me like they started off with the standard style. So you start with standard, and then you say new. And what it'll do is it'll clone whatever in standard style. So we'll say new, and then we'll name it title block. We'll say OK. And it seems that there's already one in there. And so I'm just going to name it title block, and I'll just add a 2 to it. I'm not sure why I have one in there already. And so now I've created that title block text style, and what I'll do is go through and set it up as Times New Roman. As far as the font style, they want us to use bold italic. We're going to leave the height at 0, width factor, obliquing angle alone, and we're not going to set it up as annotative. And so we're just basically following this pattern right here. And then what we'll do is we'll just say OK, and then we'll select the notes style, set it as current, and we'll close it, and that'll allow us to use the notes style. And then we'll go through and we'll work with putting text on. So all we did was set up a new text style where I called mine title block 2 because I already had a title block 1 in here. And so I can say close. And it says the current text style has been modified. Do you want to save the changes? Let's say yes. And then if I come back here to my text styles, I can go and choose notes and set that current, and then I can close it. And now what they want us to do is they want us to work within a viewport. And so creating multiple lines. Now since the notes text style is annotative, what it should do is automatically set the text height within the viewport for us. And so what it's basically saying is that since we have the text height set at 1/8 of an inch, when we click in the viewport to apply it, it's going to increase the scale to 6 inches. And what that does is it basically takes 1/8 of an inch, and it takes this calculation where if we say we have 1/4 of an inch, which is 0.25, right? And so 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. And so if we take that and we multiply it times 48, we'll get our scale factor. And so it says it's 12. Maybe I did it backwards. It should be 6. maybe my scale factor is half of that. Let me double check that and we'll come back to that. But as we go through, it will do that calculation for us. And so basically it's saying that since we had an 1/8 of an inch scale and we're at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot, that means 0.25 equals 12. And so if we take 12 divided by 0.25, we get a scale factor of 48, which is what I pretty much thought I did, but it said it was 12. So let's see what happens here with it. So as we go through, we can go in and we can put a text box within the viewport and then just type something in there and we'll see how that works. And so here I am in my viewport. I double click in there. It's set for 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. And then if I go and I put in my notes and I go and make a multi-line text box, I can go through and I can type that in. Now I goofed up my scale, which probably come back and goof me up. So I'm going to bail out of that and say no, set my scale and lock it this time. And so I thought it was locked. Let's try it again. Multi-line text, create a box and say this is notes text. And then what we'll do is we'll say green check mark. And then if I zoom in on it, what this will do is it will print it out at 1/8 inch text height according to the viewport scaling. And so they say if you use an annotative text in model space, it will ask us about placing the text height. To me, this is really pretty confusing. I usually don't use a lot of annotative text height, and so essentially here they are doing the math, saying 1/4 of an inch equals 12 is the same as 1/4 of an inch equals 12, or 0.25 equals 12, which gives us our common denominator of 48. And so typically the way that would work is you would scale anything in model space by 48 times because you're shrinking it in the viewport to a scale factor of 48, or 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. And so that's how they calculate these text heights in model space. And so if you want this text height to be printed at the specific size of like 3/16 of an inch, you would go into model space and make that 9 inches tall in the text height to get that to work properly. Like I said, there's charts. It's a bit complicated. I really don't use it that much, but essentially let's just go ahead and see how that works, and I can show you some easier ways to do it. But apparently this seems to be working just fine. If we take a look at it, text height looks great. We're working within what they call floating model space, which is within that viewport. That's why we see the UCS icon. If I come in here to model space, here we are, this is our text, and I'm not sure if I can throw a measurement on it, but if I can kind of just guesstimate it, see, it's almost 6 inches tall, and I'm just guesstimating it. So yeah, it's working really quite well. It's doing what they're saying it's doing, even though my math might not be perfect. So as we go through, and if we're going to go into the Annotate tab and we're going to use this Notes tab and we're going to put multi-line text in, here it goes through and tells us about this error in going through and working with annotative text in model space. And I'm not going to really dwell on this because it just gets to be really confusing. And so when we use the annotative text, we want to use it in paper space in a floating viewport. All right, editing single line text, editing multi-line text, relocating text, and special characters. So as we go through and we look at this, I'm going to just cancel out of this right here, and I'm going to escape, and let's go and do this in floating model space. If I double click on the text, I'm in the edit mode, okay, and I can add whatever I want, right? And so That's great. And then we can add special characters. Now, you don't have to memorize the codes like they have shown here. %D, %P, %C. We'll give you these characters. I've been using this software long enough that I know how to use them because they didn't have them all up here, which is way easier, which is what the author should be telling you to do. And so what I would do is I'd say %D here, and then it makes it into a degree symbol. And then I can say %P, and it makes it into plus or minus. And then I can say %C, it makes it into a diameter symbol. Or you can make it easy on yourself and just go up here to the symbols, and you can choose degrees, plus or minus, almost equal, any of the symbols that you want. Alrighty. So they ask you to put in this door swing 120 degrees, %D, and it'll say door swings through 120 degrees. Pretty straightforward stuff. And so if we come back here and we back this up, and we say door swings through 100%D, or you just pull it off the menu, which I think would be easier, and green check mark. Done. All right, continuing. So you can also work with these character maps. Sometimes we'll use this. They have like in mechanical design, GD and T symbols. You can create secret messages if you use wingdings or something like that, or symbols. But it's really not worth going into at this point. But if you choose other fonts and character maps, you can do that. And so if I go here and I say multi-line text, put a box in here, and then where it has my characters to be able to place in there, and I'll have to figure out where those character map is. I can go through and add those, but at this point, we'll come back to that at another point. Scale text, I haven't really used this command before, but apparently we can choose scale text, click on a piece of text, and change the text height. And so if we give that a try, let's see if it'll work on annotative text. And it looks like we can go through and we can edit some of these different things. If I look at this area right here, it's really not saying anything as far as the text height goes. Let's see if I can type in 3/8. It changes that height. And no, it didn't really do anything. All it really allowed me to do is to change the justification, like center. Here it is. And now I could say 3/8. And again, it's ignoring it. It's not really a command. And I've never used it anyway, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But apparently we can update that text with some of these other properties. And so now we're going to go look at creating different dimension styles. And so as we look at these different dimension styles, what we're going to do is we're going to create a dimension style off of the standard dimension using kind of the same technique. We'll hit this dim style command, or if you type in DDIM, that will work the same way. And we'll create a new style, and we'll name that new style interior design. And then we'll go through and we'll set up that new style according to these different pages within the windows. And so we'll start with primary units. We'll make it architecture, precision 1/16, etc. So let's back that up. We're going to go into dimension style. We're going to say new, and we're going to name it interior design. I'm going to zoom this out a little bit can see what we're up to. Here's my dimension. Here's my dimension style. If I click on that, okay, we've currently got it set here. I'm going to set it to the standard, and then I'm going to say new, and I'm going to say interior design. I'm going to say so it looks like we want to make this one annotative also. So we'll say annotative, and then we'll go and set up the primary units tab. Primary units. Primary units are going to be architecture, and we'll dial in all these other aspects. So we have it at architecture 1/16 horizontal fraction format, meaning it's like this. Scale factor 1. Don't change this. This will really goof things up for you. If you do change it, everything will be multiplied by. So if you change this to 2 instead of the real size being 1 inch, what it would measure it would be twice that. It would be 2 inches. Everything else 1. We're not going to worry about zero suppression, and we'll work with decimal degrees. So this tab looks fine. Continuing on to the next page, we're going to go into the lines tab, and I usually work these from left to right, but apparently they want to change it this way. And so they're going to go and set this up like this, where off the baseline is going to be 3/8 of an inch. Change the value of extend beyond to 3/32. And these are kind of CAD standards. You know, what this 3/32 means is it's 3/32 from this arrowhead out to here. Okay, so these are just CAD standards. Typically your CAD manager like me or Al would go and set them up for you. Change the value of the offset from the origin to a 16th. It's this little gap right here. Change all colors and line weights from by block to by layer. And so we'll change these to by layer. So as we go through, here we are in the lines tab, and we're going to change this to by layer and by layer. And everything else looks like the extension tabs want to be by layer as well. And then all of these other ones look like they're setting them up by layer as well. So we'll just follow suit with that. Extend beyond, they're having theirs set up at 3/32. And so if we come in here, and it doesn't let me dial it down because our precision in our primary units isn't 3/32. And so I'm going to leave it let's see what happens if I dial it in 3/32. Okay, it'll take it. Offset from the origin 1/16, that's fine. So we're matched up here. This is how it will look on the Mac. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the symbols and arrows tab, and we're just going to match these. We're going to use architectural ticks, closed filled arrowheads for the leaders, arrowhead size 1/16, mark 3/32, that's what this is. And basically we're just going to set this as it's shown here. Symbols and arrows, architectural tick, and that's both of them, closed filled 1/16, mark. If we set it to line, you see it's a big mark, and none. This number here, this 3/32, is how much, if it was aligned, that would extrude out, but it looks like they may have updated that. We're going to leave that alone. Break size 1/8 of an inch, preceding 45, 1.5. Good to go. How to do it on the Mac. We're going to next look at the text tab, and we're going to set the text tab to notes. And so when we go into this, change the text height to 1/8 of an inch. Mac only do this before changing the style. Change the text style to notes if you haven't already done so. So we'll see how this looks. It looks to me like we set this at 1/8 of an inch. This is a Windows dialog box. And so we'll just, again, we'll just match it to what we see in the text box here. So we'll go to text and we'll change this to notes. We'll set this to by layer. Everything else looks the same. Centered, left to right, horizontal, and offset from dimension line. They have this one at a 1/16. All right, so we're good to go here. We're going to go to the Fit tab, and we're going to dial in these other aspects of it. And so in the Scale for Dimensions feature portion, Annotative should already be checked off. And so that's this area right here that we set up when we created it. These are fit options, which means where they're going to put the text, if it's going to be between the arrows or outside of the arrows. We can talk about this at some future time. At this point, we're just going to set it up just the way they have it. And so we're going to go, and I think it's because my current layer is red. I really should have probably put a different layer on it, but either way, we'll go to Fit, either text and arrows, besides, Annotative is checked off, and then we'll have these fine-tuning check marks tuned in, and we're good to go with that text style. All right, and since we are only changing, we plan to make our new dimensions style, we'll click OK, and we'll exit. And then what we'll do is we'll dial in the interior design text style, and we'll make some dimensions on a faucet. And I put the faucet drawing in D2L, and so you can go here to D2L, and then if you're in the module 11, you can download the faucet drawing and open it. Now I'm not sure if I can open it in this one, because what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to place that faucet into here, because what's going to happen is it's not going to have the text style, because the text style is only associated with the drawing that I created it in. So I'm going to OK this, and then I'm going to close it. I'll set the interior design current. I'll close it, and then here is my faucet, and I'll just say, yeah, go ahead, take it as read only. But you'll notice I don't have the dimension style in here that I just created. Well, I guess I do. Never mind. So I do have it. I can close that, and then I can go through and I can apply those dimensions as we have before. If not, you can always copy it and paste it into the drawing and apply them. So as we take a look at how this is going to lay out then, what we're going to do is we're going to dimension from this endpoint to this endpoint, and we should have that 1 1/4 inch dimension. And so if we go here, here's our dimensions. This is like smart dimension. If we go linear, and then we want to make sure that our O snaps are on and they're set for endpoints, which they are. And then I can come back here and I can say linear. And then I can drop that dimension on there. Now when you dimension, you should be putting them on a dimension layer. And so this one doesn't have a layer. What the author has a tendency to do is make the layers afterwards. And so if I wanted to create a new layer and call it dimension, I could do that. And then if I usually make them green, and then if I wanted to, I could place it on the dimension layer. Voila. So we can go through and then apply some other dimensions to this drawing. Okay, and so we put this in here. Pick the intersection point at C and pick the end point at D. And so it looks like that's on the next page. Yeah, so C and D, and this would be an aligned dimension, and because it's going to be parallel to it. Aligned, use O snaps, and there it is, my half-inch dimension. And what they did was they moved it with a grip to be outside of there. Radius dimension, we're going to put a radius dimension on this arc right here, and it should come in at 1 3/4. Again, I could put this on the dimension layer, and I could make the dimension layer active by dialing that in. Come back to my Annotate tab and select a radius. Select the area, place that on the drawing. And so we have done that just as they have. Angular dimension, and so we can put an angular dimension here to show that this is 60 degrees before we get to this line here. Voila. Diameter dimension, and so we can put a diameter dimension they just have a circle next to it. All right. And there we have it. And then they want to create a new dimension style, which is like a sub-dimension style of the interior design. And what they want to do is to add a prefix or a suffix with the word diameter to all the diameter dimensions. And so I've never done this before, but it looks fairly straightforward. We come in here to our dimension style, and then here's our interior design, and then we come over here and we can go through, and it doesn't give me the option for diameter dimensions here. I'm not sure why it's not, but apparently it could be a 2023 and I'm on an older version on my older laptop. But you can dial in the suffix, or essentially what you can do, you don't even have to do that. It's actually easier. You just double click on the dimension, and then it's annotated. It's basically locked into the size, but as long as you don't go and change the 4-inch diameter, you can just add the word DIA, period, and then green check mark it, and it's fine. Dimensions are what's known as associative, so if I were to change the size of this, the dimension will update with it too. But I think that's a better way to do it than it is to create a subset of the dimension style. It just gets confusing when people use your drawings. Alrighty, and so that's what they did. They just had this sub-style. Modifying existing dimensions, again, we can just double click on those dimensions and modify them. And then they create a multi-leader style. and they go through and they create it for a multi-leader style. I would have used splines, but they use straight lines. But I'll just do a quick rundown on this. And so essentially, we create a new style. We name it label. So here's our multi-leader style. It used to all be under one. We go here, say new, new, label. We say continue, and then we just go and set it up the way they have it. M-text, notes, horizontal, etc. Everything is by block. And so here's our leader structure. And so here's content, M-text. We're going to say notes, keep horizontal. We'll dial this in as by layer. You see it's green now because I was on a green layer for dimensions. 1/8 is fine for the text height. It's pulling that from the notes. Text height, middle of top line, middle of top line, and we'll get a straight line like that. So that's set. I prefer on architecture or interior ones to use splines, but they stay with the straight. And then they set everything up as shown here. Straight, by layer, by layer, by layer, close fill, 1/4 inch, 1/8. Leader format, straight, by layer, by layer, by layer, 1/4 inch, and we've set that style up. Next page, structure. Basically, we just check off and change the landing distance to 1/4 inch, and we'll set this as annotative. 2, automatic landing distance, 1/4, annotative. And we're good to go. And then we can just go through and insert a multi-leader and set it to this label. And then we can go in and put a dimension on our coffee table. And that's basically it. And so if we come back here, we say OK, close it. Now I don't think the dimension style is going to come into the other drawing that I have, but let's take a look. And so if I come back here, and then let's say this is our coffee table, double click in the viewport, and if I go into my multi-leader style, no, it didn't carry it through, so I would have to go and create it in my other one. Now you can import them, and so for example, if I wanted to bring in my dimension style, which I don't think I have to because I think I have it in this drawing. Yeah, I have the interior design, but I didn't bring in the other one for multi-leader. And so what I could do is I could say DC for design center. And then what it allows you to do is to grab any of the content from an existing drawing. And so if I come back here, I'll collapse this. Here's my faucet drawing. And what I'll do is I'll save it with my initials so that I know that's mine. And then I'm going to just go and throw it into my directory for this. I'll save it. And then if I dial that in into my design center, and I'm in my interior, I'm in my hotel floor plan drawing, and I come back here and I dial in my faucet drawing, I can grab any of the layers. I can grab any of the dimension styles or multi-leader styles. And so if I want to grab the multi-leader style, I double click on that. And so here it is. Here's the styles that they created. And all you do is drag them in. And boom, now it's part of the drawing. If I come back here and I want to grab another one, I can just go and boom, drag it in. And now when I go into these leader styles, you'll see that I have the label and the annotative. And so I can go and make the label one active, close it, and then I can put a label on my coffee table. And I have ortho on, so it's going straight. So I can come over here and I can say coffee table. And green check mark it. I think they look a lot better if I go through and I modify this and make them splines. So I'm going to do that, even though the book doesn't want me to. Close it. It's just a little softer and looks a little more artistic. All right, so that ends this video for chapter 11. I'm going to stop this recording and then I'll post it in D2L.